Hi everyone, I'm Helen Seyler, and this is a recording of a presentation for the Conversations with Geosciences talk hosted by Mvoto on the 3rd of October. So I apologize to those who were there on the 3rd, and I was having technical difficulties, so Zoom repeatedly crashed for me and I couldn't give this presentation, so sorry for that. And Rebecca's asked me to record it after the event so that those who are still interested, can listen to this talk. So as I said, I'm Helen Seyler. I'm a hydrogeologist. I'm from the UK originally, and I've been in South Africa 16 years, basically since completing my master's in hydrogeology in the UK. I then came out to South Africa, and my first job in South Africa was with Mvoto. So this is so I know the company well, and this is why I think they asked me to share my experiences at this talk. So before starting, I would just like to say, to pay my respects to Rowena Hay and Chris Hartnady. Rowena was the founder of Mvoto, and they both passed away just over a year ago from COVID. And I think they've been, or respects have been paid many times, but this is the first time I'm kind of in a Mvoto hosted event since then. So I just wanted to mention that. And Rowena was a really formidable female geoscientist, and she comes up a lot in this talk. Also just want to say that this is just my personal story. I now work with ERM, Environmental Resources Management, who are a sustainability consulting company. This isn't an ERM presentation, this is really just my personal experiences as a female geoscientist. Okay, I think we can get started. So an outline of what I want to talk about. Firstly, I'm just going to share a little bit more about my background and some early experiences I had in the workplace, and then reflect a little bit on what helped me, in the hope that for some of you there might be some advice in some of that. And lastly, look at what to look out for in prospective employers. And I would just say, of course, I'm recording this after the event, and it was very interesting to note that the part of the discussion that I did manage to catch, there was a lot of similarity between some of the things I had planned to talk about and the questions and answers and the debate that we were having at the end. So I hope that some of the content here maybe reiterates some of those conversations, because I haven't changed anything based on what did come up. So my background, so as I said, I grew up in the UK, and I grew up in a household of 3 sisters and a brother, and my mother also has 3 sisters and a brother, and her sisters, my aunts, all seem to have predominantly had daughters rather than sons. And also, before I was born, both of my grandfathers had passed away. So all of the family gatherings that I remember as a child and growing up, they always felt they were very female dominated. My surroundings were female dominated, and by strong females as well. That kind of quiet strength, was very around me a lot. My grandmother was a school teacher, and my mum was a GP, a doctor. And my dad used to always make the joke that he was surrounded by women and he was controlled by women. In a friendly way, he made those jokes, not in a sarcastic way. And he was a gentle giant who treated us all as if we could, we could do whatever we wanted to do, basically, as in achieve whatever we wanted to achieve. I was never made to feel or lesser than my male colleagues at school or at university. And so I felt I was growing up in a very kind of gender equal society or setting. So I've just made that note there. I felt like it was a matriarchy, and I really never experienced mansplaining or any kind of deference to male colleagues growing up at school or university. And I think that's quite a blessing. And I'll come back to why I think it was a blessing. And I acknowledge that not everyone has that privilege, So then I finished my studies in the UK and came out to South Africa to work with Mvoto. And I remember I would say that I think that South African society is probably more gendered than the UK, in my personal experience. And I began to notice a few examples of kind of what we would call maybe microaggressions towards based on gender differences. And one early experience was on a project that I started. We were working a lot with the engineers of Ninumshand, who are now Zutari, and I walked into a boardroom of 20 or so male colleagues from Ninumshand, and I sat down at the table before we started this meeting that I had gone there to attend. And the person next to me introduces himself to me, and before I had the chance to say who I was, he said to me, "Oh, you the new PA?" I said, "No." Yeah, and then I had another similar experience when I was taking over a project from a colleague at Mvoto, and so I was taking over kind of the coordination and the project management and the main hydrogeologist on the project, looking at the monitoring data and making interpretations. And we would have quarterly meetings with the client, and he would come along, the colleague who handed over to me would come along with me to the meetings, male colleague, and the client would routinely ask his question to my male colleague, who was certainly not a mansplainer. He would then turn to me and say, "Helen, I think you can better answer that than me." And he probably could have answered it, but he was kind of, supporting that I was taking over the project, so would defer the question to me. So we would have this bizarre triangle of questions for about a year, the client asking my male colleague the question, him turning to me and saying, "Helen, go for it." And we had that for a year until I turned up at a meeting, and my colleague couldn't come with me to the meeting, so I went with somebody else. I don't remember who it was. And the client said, "How will we cope without Cornelius?" It was Cornelius, who was my colleague that, was very supportive of me taking over this project. But the client said, "How will we cope without him?" And I had to kind of brace myself and carry on with the meeting. And it was only after that meeting that the client directed their questions to me and saw that we actually did cope. Yeah. And that last example may well have been a lot to do with me being junior rather than me being female. But the first example is certainly about me being female. That engineer wouldn't have said the same to a junior male, wouldn't have said, "Are you the new PA?" But I would say that on the whole, these are kind of I had to rack my brain, and in conversation with Rebecca before this talk, thought about what has it been like being a female in the geosciences. And I think it's good news that these are the only kind of negative examples I can think of that I experienced. And I think that's a good thing. And I think times are changing. I know that other people may have had tougher experiences than myself. I didn't have tough experiences really at all. And I think the one thing that really helped me was my upbringing, so those two examples that I have there could easily have knocked me off course. They, if I had been, they could have got under my skin and upset me, but they didn't. And that's, I think, because I believed I could. I didn't believe myself to be lesser than the male engineer next to me who asked me if I was a PA. So it didn't get in, and I just listed here, I think we all, whilst I had this upbringing where I didn't believe myself to be less to my male colleagues around me, we all can need a step up with self-empowerment from time to time, especially as, we continue to grow through our careers. I continue to challenge myself now. So I looked up tips for self-empowerment. This is from a blog, the Santander blog post on female empowerment. And I found this list was really interesting. It's a great blog article. So maybe go have a read. And so I just wanted to go through it here. Their tips were, firstly, to know yourself. Secondly, to set goals. And each of these is described in detail. I won't go into the detail so much. Set goals. And I think that if you've read Atomic Habits, the book by James Clear, that's a wonderful book largely about goal setting. And he has some guidance on his website for setting goals. And the website below it also has a lot about how goals can assist with our essentially our happiness. Number 3, to get out of your comfort zone, because when you do get out of your comfort zone, by and large, you generally perform better than you think you're going to, and it helps with your self-empowerment. So I just want to tell you about the first time I ever had to do a conference presentation. I was so unbelievably nervous. I had been with Mvoto not long, I don't know how long, a year or two, I don't know. It was the Sankias conference, which is a surface water dominated conference. So I felt completely out of my depth, and I was presenting on integrated surface water groundwater modeling. I was so nervous. There were definitely tears in the morning of my presentation. And I stayed in my room the entire day practicing rather than listening to other talks. And of course, it went fine. And since then, I don't get the same feelings before conference presentations anymore, gladly. So it's just an experience, just an example of, we have to stretch ourselves and get out of our comfort zone in order to grow, And I've put an example, a snapshot there of a book cover. That's a book called Run for the Love of Life. And I really recommend this book to actually to anyone. I was going to say to people who need a step up in terms of self-empowerment, but it's a really good read. It's a memoir, and the story is about how running and how extreme distance running, actually in this case, really builds character and really builds that belief in oneself that I can, and the author talks about how that belief carries with her, or stays with her from running into the boardroom. And it's also a story about female empowerment. There's a chapter in the book called It's a Man's World, and I won't ruin the story by telling you much more about it. And I've put at the bottom there bias alert, because I know Erica very well, but that's not why I'm recommending the book. Go and read the reviews. It's being raved about, and it's really helped a lot of people. Build a network of contacts. Be yourself. Be yourself is referring to the fact that there are many different styles and forms of leadership. You don't need to enter the workplace and think, okay, I need to behave like my male colleagues, or I need to lead in the same way that they do. There are many different styles of leadership, so be yourself. And work on your self-confidence. And there's a great TED talk by Amy Cuddy about how to develop confidence simply by changing your posture. It's a really powerful talk. And number 7, to educate yourself. So I also want to just talk a little bit about the mentor I had and how that helped me. And as I said at the start, I worked with Rowena Hay, and she mentored me when I joined Mvoto. And she said to me, do you want to be mentored? Because we were having a conversation one evening at dinner, and I said, yes, definitely. And she said, think about it carefully, because I'll put you through your paces. And I still said yes, and she definitely did put me through my paces, but it was a real help in my early career. And so I wanted to just share with you here some of the lessons that Rowena taught me. She was a wonderful, technically she was a great geoscientist, but more than that, what I got from her was how basically operating in a professional manner. It was that sinking into working into the workspace. She helped with that. And also, she taught me a lot about strategic thinking. She had a great mind for seeing the big picture and breaking it down into how do we go about this. Anyway, and she had a real knack for metaphors. So she taught through metaphors, and those metaphors are still stuck in my head today, and I think they help me almost every day at my desk. So the first one I want to share with you was stop stirring all the pots, let one boil over so that at least one other can get finished. And here she was referring to, as we get more and more busy, as the pressure builds up, we tend to then think we need to do a little bit of everything. We've got many deadlines. We don't want to disappoint anybody who's waiting for work from us or waiting for deliverables from us. And we do a little bit of everything. Nothing gets properly finished. And in that situation, monotasking is actually 10 times more efficient. Ignore the rest of what's on your plate. Tell people it's going to be late so that you can at least finish one thing properly. And Rowena used to always say, let's go eat that elephant one bite at a time. And that's obviously referring to taking on something much bigger than you can chew, but at least taking it on and just starting slowly. And I often think of this when I start a new project, or something comes in and I think, gosh, how am I going to do this? I have no idea what we're going to do on this project. I think to myself, and then I think, just start. Just plan the first few steps. Down the line, when you're stuck, you'll work it out. You'll get help. this is a very important one. Let the trains leave the station together. This is about, it's rare that we do all of a project on our own, or all of a report, or all of a deliverable, a deadline. Usually it's a piece of work that has many people giving input to it. I'll use for example, for myself, I don't do GIS processing. Let's say I'm doing a hydrogeology kind of report that needs some GIS processing in it. Often we get into this mindset that we're so busy, we're so stretched, we can't think of the other piece that we need to get help on, and we just think of what do we need to do. So you do your part, then you think, okay, now I need this input from this colleague, and then you ask for their input, and then you have to stop and wait, do something else while you wait. Rowena used to say regularly, let the trains leave the station together, because it's significantly more efficient. There's no waiting for input. And it means, before you start sinking into your part, speak to your colleagues about bits that they can help with, so that that's being done in parallel. And it's a massive stress reducer, actually. When I get very busy and I think, gosh, I haven't got back to that report yet and it's due in a week's time, it's a stress reducer for me to think it's fine. My colleague at least is doing their bit on it. So it helps. Close those emails. Rowena used to hate emails. And, she'd walk around the office when she arrived, go and walk and visit everyone at their desk and look on the screen, what are you busy with? Emails. And she once said to me, we don't get paid for sending emails. We get paid for, deliverables, products, advice, solving problems with clients. So yeah, close those notifications. I religiously keep my notifications closed for several hours a day, all of them, emails, WhatsApp, phone, everything, Teams. It's a big distraction to getting anything done. The phrase "I'm waiting for" was banned in the office, and I have now adopted Rowena's distaste for the phrase "I'm waiting for" in the workplace. I'm waiting for kind of, when you say that, it gives the picture that you're sitting there doing nothing, waiting for something. So, for example, let's say I'm doing a pump test report, and the water quality data isn't ready yet, and Rowena says, hey, is that report finished? And I say, no, I'm waiting for the pump test, the water quality data. A much better way of saying it is to say, my part of the report is done, but the problem is we can't finish it until we have the water quality data from the lab, and they're delayed. We were expecting to get their data today. We haven't. I've called the lab and they say it's coming on Monday. It's a week late because of X, Y, and Z. And I've told the client that the report is going to be late by a week, and they're okay with it. If you say that to Rowena, she'd have said, fabulous, well handled. If you say, I'm waiting for the lab test data, she would have not been so impressed. Yeah. So getting work fit was something Rowena used to talk to me a lot about. And I think there is a big transition from the professionalism that is required at university. In my case, I think there was none required, to the professionalism that's required for how you behave in the workspace. My example here was Rowena once came into the office and was, really keen to see a report and was like, send it to me, I'm ready to review it. I'm like, I'm not quite ready. She's like, doesn't matter, send it wherever it's up to. So I just sit down, send whatever. Hadn't spell checked the report, and she was not very impressed and was explaining to me it's about showing up in a professional way, and it's about respecting the time of your colleagues. It's energetically costly to open a report or open a piece of work from someone that you're going to read and it's a mess, it's not formatted well, or it's not even spell checked. So let's get the basics right before sending work to colleagues. And Rowena also entrenched in me that personal well-being comes first, and it comes before. If you are not handling your personal well-being, you can't function in the workplace. We used to walk her dogs often in the forest and plan work and debrief on meetings or projects. And I remember sometimes saying, I'm too busy to come, Rowena, I can't go walking, I've got work to do. And she'd say, nonsense, when you get back, you'll feel much more productive. And it's always right, it's always right that taking a break and getting some exercise helps with work. Okay, so after that, I just want to say briefly at the end now, a few tips on what you could look out for in an employer. So whilst I've shared, I didn't feel like I was disadvantaged in any way being a female in the geosciences sector career. It is true that gender pay gap still exists, and these are both headline news articles from South Africa this year, from 2022, and the second is that the gender pay gap keeps widening in South Africa. So we don't have data on that for South Africa, but we do have data in the UK because companies are obliged by law to send data on their gender pay gap to the government, and this is from the UK government website. They report then on those statistics based on all the data they receive. So you can see here, for example, financial managers and directors have a pay gap of 31%, where men are receiving 31% higher salary than women. Geoscientists weren't on the list, but I found environmental professionals and engineering professionals, both of which had a 4% gender pay gap. 4% may not sound like much, but I did some calculations. Basically, if you're receiving 20,000 Rand a month, your male colleague is receiving 20,800 a month. So around about 10,000 Rand more in a year. If we assume that your salary goes up as you proceed, progress through the profession, your career, and I did a few calculations. I mean, there's so many variables, but basically I then worked out that if you put that difference, the 4% difference every year or every month into a retirement annuity, your male colleague is retiring with several million Rand more than you. Yeah, it's not great. So whilst I think I haven't experienced any challenges being a female in the sector, there are still challenges that we need to overcome. So what can you look out for in an employer? The good news is the benefit of diversity is becoming more and more obvious to companies. So this McKinsey and company have written a report. They've written 3 reports on diversity, and this is their latest in 2020. In earlier reports, they built a business case for diversity, basically saying that boards of companies that were diverse performed better financially. So there's a business case for diversity, and they're now saying in their 2020, their latest report, that relationship between diversity on the executive team and the likelihood of financial outperformance has got even stronger. And that's based on more than 1,000 companies in 15 countries. So basically, boards without diverse representation of all genders, ethnicities, races, sexual orientation, religions will underperform. So this is good news. I think that the history, or the situation where women are put down in the workplace is definitely changing. I think has changed a significant amount, and this just suggests it's going to keep going in that direction. So what should you look out for? I would say take a good look at the company. Take a good look. So I joined Environmental Resources Management this year in March, and they are a sustainability consulting company, and I looked them up and had a good look, and I was really, I remember thinking, oh, that's cool, when I saw that their CEO is a female. It's not anymore. She's left the role, and a male has come in. But I was impressed to see that at the start when I joined. So I think look at the company. Is there a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy in place? And I know, some smaller companies may not have a written up policy, but they will certainly have an approach. It's something they need to be thinking about. So have a look. Is there a policy? What are they doing for diversity? Also, I would ask what health and safety procedures are in place to support me on site. I haven't spoken so much about site work. I spent a lot of my junior career behind a computer modeling rather than on site. And when I was on site, I didn't come across any issues, so I didn't make it a big part of my talk, but I know we talked about it in the discussion after the Q&A session in this call. So it is something I would ask an employer now. What's in place to support me on site as a female, and see what their response is. And I would also ask, is there a mentorship program in place? Specifically ask what's in place to help me further my career. And I think a mentorship program is different to having a line manager. You know, your manager is there to keep you busy, for technical issues, but a mentor who's going to kind of hold you by the hand and take you through whatever development is required is something that's, you know, worth its weight in gold, really. Okay, so I think that's all from me. Thank you for listening. I hope that's helped somebody in some way. Okay.